Hi there. Now today, as promised, I'm going to talk to you about the poisons. So here we go. The first poison I need to tell you about is blame. When you blame, you place responsibility for something negative on someone or something else. And while it gets you off the hook, that's why we do it. It relieves discomfort, so it's reinforcing. It also keeps you from taking action. Just the act of taking the burden off yourself alleviates the discomfort of the bad situation. But it keeps you from learning from your mistakes, and learning from our mistakes is something that's not fun, but is really good for us. Blame strengthens unhelpful negative emotions, and it also keeps you from fixing whatever was wrong. It's bad for relationships, too. My son and I were recently discussing blame and all the energy that people put into blame. We were imagining that if blame could be converted into energy, it could power the world. And that's a sad thing. But it really speaks to the energy that we put into blame. Energy that we could and should spend building helpful traits, attitudes, and skills, and pursuing valuable goals. And since I'm talking about blame here, and this is kind of an aside point, but it's important, the fulfillment cultivation model is based on the now proven concept that you are able to develop the traits, attitudes, and skills needed for fulfillment, to connect with your values and strengths, to create compelling goals, to take effective action, and to eliminate poisons, and that this can be done pretty easily. But the downside of this model is that it can lead to people feeling inadequate or blaming themselves, or feeling blamed for their own failings, for their own stumbling blocks, or for not being super great at thriving. But I want to remind you that this is a practical model for real-life human beings who stumble at times. Blaming others, or blaming or judging yourself, that's the poison. If you struggle at times, that's okay. It happens. The antidote to blame is to forgive yourself when you struggle. We're all human and we all struggle at times. Each time you choose compassion or forgiveness or empathy over blame, you work to detox from the poison of blame. Comparison plus judgment, these two behaviors when combined form a super poison. On its own, comparison is not that bad, but when we add judgment, we may find that we don't measure up. And when we don't measure up, we can feel bad about ourselves, not good enough, defective, like we're losers. And what do you think that does for our personal growth? And we can also become jealous, resentful of what someone else has or has accomplished. And jealousy is one of the most insidious energy zappers. It uses a lot of fuel, and it generates and sustains negative emotions, and it's really toxic, like acid for ourselves. Comparing ourselves to others is a problem, because even when we win in the comparison, we lose, because we're always at risk. There's always someone else to compare ourselves to, or another day or another situation where we might not come out on top. When we try to feel better about ourselves by comparing ourselves to others, it's just almost always going to backfire. This doesn't mean that we can't engage in healthy competition when it's fun or useful. Healthy competition is competing just based on the competition itself, and not making global judgments about ourselves or other people based on the competition. But we're really prone to this more poisonous form of comparison. It just kind of creeps in. We tend to feel fat when our friends are thinner, to feel like our houses are bad when our neighbors have their homes updated, or to feel stupid when our colleagues say something smart. We have to practice keeping our own quantity of whatever characteristic is being measured constant, and not to be changeable based on the behavior or accomplishments of someone else. Avoiding comparison takes work, but as we nourish our confidence, wisdom, and equanimity, we can get better at being okay within ourselves so that comparison doesn't lure us quite as convincingly. Talking again about how these elements of fulfillment all work together. The formula for cultivating confidence is by increasing compassion and decreasing comparison. Anyway, I'll move on now. It sounds a little funny, but we should learn how to avoid avoidance. how to stop hiding from ourselves and the things in life that frighten us. So avoidance keeps our lives small, which is not a great way to flourish. Avoidance is really tempting. When something frightens us and we figure out how to escape or avoid it, that feels really good. It's a big relief. So, of course, as adaptive people, we're wired to do what works, and inadvertently we train ourselves to keep avoiding the things that frighten us. And that is a way to stay safe, I suppose, but it doesn't even keep us comfortable, because the more we avoid, the less we feel capable of coping with our challenges, and the smaller and the more dangerous our worlds become. And I guess that's fine if you want to live small. But if you want any growth or change, chances are you're going to have to take on a challenge to do something a little scary. We have to learn to recognize avoidance, understand why it's so appealing, and then to take on the challenge. As I mentioned the other day, there's that well-known self-help book called Fear the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that's what we have to teach ourselves to do. And there are strategies that can help us to do this. And nourishing our foundations, especially traits like resilience and fear resistance, and developing self-efficacy and curiosity, and connecting with our core values and strengths certainly can help. Rumination is the psychology term for worrying or locking onto a specific thought, and it's also poisonous for our growth. It sounds like a poison, doesn't it? Rumination keeps us from being flexible and creative, from solving problems, from trying, and it sucks up an enormous amount of mental and even physical energy. The ACT therapist Russ Harris uses a simple but a brilliant exercise to illustrate the impact of rumination, or what he calls cognitive fusing, and I'd like to share that quick exercise with you right now. So grab a piece of paper, letter-sized or larger, or a magazine or a catalog, and if you don't have one nearby, you can use your imagination because that'll work too. And imagine that this piece of paper is the thought that you are ruminating about, that you are locked onto. And to illustrate the experience of locking onto the thought, take that piece of paper and hold it right up in front of your face, touching your nose and in front of your eyes, and hold it there really tight. Now, how clearly can you see the world around you? Can you see what's right in front of you? What does it do to your experience? Do you feel open and loose? Of course, the answer to all these questions is no. Now take that paper and still hold it, but place it on your lap and hold it loosely. Now, can you see the world around you? Can you see what's right in front of your nose? Do you feel any more open? Again, rhetorical questions, the answer of course is yes. And this simple metaphor really does illustrate what it's like when we get fused with our thoughts, locked into what we're worrying about. Just the other morning there was something on my mind. I woke up with it, held it with me as I brushed my teeth, as I washed my face, I exercised with it, then I sat down to have a cup of coffee. My worry was still with me, right in front of my face there. Actually, I was fused with it, so in essence, it was me. Then there was a loud noise outside the house that jarred me out of my thought lock. It snapped me back to the present moment, and I noticed I was sitting by a window. It was a beautiful morning. Birds were chirping. My wind chimes were gently jingling. But until I snapped out of my mind, until I put that metaphorical paper down, I really saw and heard none of that. It was all going on. I was just completely missing it. And so that's a bit of a shame, and I'm glad I pulled myself out of that rumination. But sometimes when we ruminate or fuse with thoughts, the consequences can be far more problematic. We can make poor choices, we can get stuck, we can miss opportunities, we don't think clearly, we just hold that paper closer and tighter. And that's why rumination, worry, and cognitive fusion are truly poisons. I talked before about controlling cravings as a skill to develop. The flip side of this, of course, is giving in to cravings. We all do it from time to time, and I probably don't need to explain why caving to our cravings is not always in our best interest. The thing is that we don't want to be losing control. There's a quote I love that I've seen attributed to Mick Jagger that goes, "It's okay to lose yourself as long as you can get yourself back." And that's what I think about caving to cravings. If it's your choice to let yourself go, then you're still in control and it might be okay. But if the cravings are the boss, then you're interfering with your path towards success and fulfilled living. You need to be the boss, not the craving. And mind traps. Boy, there are entire books written about mind traps. As human beings, we're prone to making logical errors in our thinking, like exaggerating or thinking in black or white terms. We all do it, and it can get in the way of our ability to see the world clearly, to react and respond in ways that help us rather than hurt us, and it can cause us all kinds of emotional suffering. Mind traps are different than the mind locks I was talking about before, the worry and rumination and cognitive fusing. Mind traps are specific ideas, beliefs, or attitudes that lead to suffering. There are many mind traps out there. Our minds are like minefields. But I want to highlight one in particular right now because we can get trapped into having unrealistic expectations about fulfillment. Like fulfilled people are never unhappy or never experience negative emotions or make mistakes. Or that successful people never stumble or have a crisis of enthusiasm. Fulfillment doesn't put you in a happy bubble, but expecting that it will is a sure way to prevent fulfillment. And success doesn't make you immune to frustration or failure. Like I mentioned when I discussed resilience, success almost always actually requires failure along the way. But that doesn't mean that when a successful person fails, they enjoy the experience. We don't want to fall into mind traps or expectations about the journey to success or fulfillment and sabotage it. And like all the poisons that I've mentioned, there are ways that we can learn to identify our mind traps and to release ourselves from them. And nourishing ourselves with mindfulness and learning the cognitive behavioral skills of self-inquiry can provide the antidote to this poison. Procrastination is one of the most common and deadliest of diseases, and its toll on success and happiness is heavy. That's something that the self-help guru Wayne Dyer said, and it's well put. There's not much more to say about this one, except for that we can overcome procrastination by strengthening our foundation. Managing time, getting our priorities straight, knowing our values, having smart goals, building focus and persistence, working with the contents of our minds, and of course strengthening willpower. All of these will help you overcome procrastination so that you can succeed and experience fulfillment. And finally, the poison of poisons. I've put guilt and shame together here because they are how we can completely annihilate ourselves. There's a place for regretting something we've done that we believe was wrong, for being guilty of an action. But guilt and shame, both of these are global judgments. It's calling the whole basket rotten if there's one piece of bad fruit in it. We all make mistakes, some big and some small, and we all disappoint ourselves at times. But when we feel guilty or ashamed, we can't accept ourselves with our flaws, we can't correct them, we can't learn from them, we can't grow from them, and we absolutely can't flourish. Guilt and shame are very heavy burdens to bear. And self-compassion practice is the antidote to these poisons. Okay, so that's almost it. But wow, as I was putting this together, it occurred to me that this is a lot of stuff. But I wanted to share the whole big picture with you because I'm a big picture kind of person, and I believe that seeing the big picture is the best way to hone in on the details that are important to you. But the reality of cultivating fulfillment and becoming more effortlessly effective and success-ready is not even nearly as daunting as explaining it. Remember, it took me decades to work out this model. And just like a tree just grows naturally, even though at the ecological level there's some extremely complex stuff going on, most of what we do to thrive happens pretty naturally. And when gardeners work to help trees grow better, they don't add every single kind of fertilizer. They figure out what's needed. I tossed a lot of information on you over the last few days. And in reality, to thrive, you should be aware of the elements of fulfillment and the anatomy of fulfillment. This is an important model to understand. but you don't have to be working at all of these elements all of the time. In reality, people can make the kinds of changes that lead to sustainable fulfillment with a commitment of just 15 minutes a day practicing targeted exercises. But before I wind up this video series, there's just one more teeny little part I haven't told you about yet, and it's important. And I'll tell you about it tomorrow, and then I'll wind up this video series. So I'll talk to you then.